Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So today's seminar topic is markets and society. This was an article which was requested from me by Handbook of Ecological and Environmental Economics, Routledge, by the editor of the volume, and it was about how markets are causing environmental damage. So basically the issue is that actually currently the planet is being destroyed very rapidly. Some people have called it the Anthropocene era. See, geological eras are Paleocene and this scene and that scene. So this geological era is marked by the human beings because we have made such a tremendous impact on the planet that the waste, human waste, is going into the oceans, and the acidity level of the oceans has changed, and the pollution is going into the atmosphere, and the composition of the atmosphere has changed, and plants and animals are becoming extinct at a rate which is extremely high. Things that used to happen in thousands and thousands of years are taking place in just a few years. It's said that by 2050, about half of the species currently existing on the planet, which will become extinct. So, at the current rate that we are using up planetary resources, they are renewable resources. You cut down forests, they grow back. So, if they are harvested at the right rate, or even if pollution is done at the right rate, then the atmosphere has mechanism to recover. But today we are using them up at rates which makes it's far beyond the ability of the planet to handle. And if at current lifestyles, it's calculated that you need about 4 planet Earths in order to sustain the current lifestyle. And the rate at which we are consuming keeps going up, it's not down. At the same time, although some people are making some efforts to understand and to stop and reverse climate change, these are very weak and feeble and much weaker than what is necessary in order to protect the planet. At the same time, some people are trying to there's a funded campaign to spread doubt that this climate change, this doesn't exist, it's just a myth being spread by some people. So, not only are we destroying the planet, but we are at the same time trying to prevent those people who are trying to protect it from being able to act and take the actions which are necessary to save the planet. So, there is a book by Jared Diamond called Collapse, which describes a lot of societies which got stuck on patterns which led to the collapse of the society. They were not able to get themselves out, even though it was possible. But the ways and today it seems like the humanity as a whole is headed for collapse, in the sense that the ways that we are using our lives are not compatible with the survival of human life on this planet. So the question is, how did this happen? Why did this happen? This is roughly the topic of this paper. So, one thing to understand is that modern society is radically different from all traditional societies. And there is a conflict between market mechanism and social mechanisms. This is not at all realized. In fact, you see, for example, very easy to understand is that if you ask somebody to donate blood for a good cause, as a social contribution, many people will be ready to contribute. But if you ask them that I would like to buy your blood and I will pay you some money, the same person would refuse. And very interestingly, this problem was discussed, and two very famous economists, I think Samuelson and Arrow or something like that, they said that no, these two incentives will add to each other. I mean, one has a social incentive to contribute blood in order to help other people, and then there's a monetary incentive, which so he said that yes, if you pay money, then there's social. This will add to the social incentive, but it turns out not to be true. The market mechanism and the social mechanism are in conflict with each other. So, in traditional societies, markets were subordinated to social concerns. So, if a doctor said that I am going to learn medicine in order to profit from the sicknesses and of the poor people, this was considered bad, and it was the society tried to train all the members to behave in a social manner and to consider cooperation and collaboration, and without being motivated by money. And money motivation was considered a bad thing. But in the market society, it's the opposite. The social concerns are subordinated to the market concerns. And today, actually, this is the state of affairs, that if some doctor says that I'm learning medicine to serve human beings, people will laugh and say that this man is not is idealistic, not practical, and so on. But this is not true. I mean, this is a change that in 50 years ago, this was not the case, and nobody would be willing to say that I'm learning medicine in order to earn money, and I don't care about serving people. So the norms have changed, and the market norms have become dominant, and the social norms have become suppressed. And this is exactly the great transformation. This is what Karl Polanyi's very radical and very important book describes as the emergence of capitalistic society. So he says that basically the markets are driven by an internal dynamic which seeks growth and expansion and seeks deregulation. Markets want to be able to operate freely without any constraints. This is all what free market is about, laissez-faire is about, and so on. There is an ideology which says that the market should be allowed to operate without any constraints. But what Polanyi says, which is very unusual and not very much heard, is that the free operation of markets is extremely damaging to society. Not just a little bit, it's so damaging that the society cannot allow the market to operate if it is to survive. Therefore, when the market seeks to expand, the society seeks to protect itself from the bad effects. And so he says that history cannot be understood. If you want to understand the history of the 18th, 19th and 20th century, you cannot understand it except by thinking of the double movement. The double movement is, on the one hand, the markets are seeking to expand their power and break out the regulation. At the same time, the society is seeking to protect itself. And so both of these factors have to be taken into account in order to understand history. Now, these battles between the market and society are fought on two separate grounds, actually on many grounds, but one is on the institutional structure. There's some type of institutional structures which are adapted to the market, while other types of institutional structures are adapted to society. To give a very concrete example, the institution of banking is one in which encourages people to accumulate money and to increase money. This was not considered to be a good thing in traditional society. Even if you look at the Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, this has a miser called Scrooge, and he is always accumulating money and not giving to others, and basically the story is a moral story about how this man will die a bad death and go to hell unless he reforms and he starts giving money to one of his poor laborers and so on. So this is the common understanding, that hoarding money is bad, and if you have money, you should if you have more money than you need, then you should spend it on others. And this is actually very strongly taught in Islamic teachings. So while this was the case, while this was the spirit, that hoarding money was bad and wealth was not considered a good thing, accumulation of wealth was not considered a good thing, then there were no banks. And basically in the Western societies, the Jewish money lenders were the people who accumulated money and made loans, because actually the Jewish religion does not allow charge of interest to each other, but it allows Jews to charge interest to non-Jews. And so that allowed their religious doctrines allowed them to serve as bankers in a Christian society. So, but the great transformation occurred when the market, basically there were many battles which were fought between the market and society, and the market eventually won, and so the spirit of accumulation of wealth became acceptable. So as I said, there are two battles. One is on the institutional structure, so then banks came into existence. As a point of contrast, you can look at Islamic history, in which for 1,000 years there were no banks, because the spirit of accumulation and hoarding and preservation of wealth is not central, but actually the opposite of this. Spending your excess on others is central, and therefore what was the central financial institution in Islamic societies, where most of the money was? It was in waqf. This was the place where you could put money in, and this would be used for the service of society. So throughout Islamic history, social services were provided to all, free education, free health. Even using the word free shows a market orientation, because in the Islamic worldview, the idea that the society as a whole has a responsibility to provide social services to all members, all children should get an education, nobody should have to pay for this. I mean, even the idea of paying for education was alien. So everybody was educated, everybody was clothed, housed, fed. All of these things were done by the institution of waqf, which was done by private basis. It was not done by the government. That's another interesting factor. It was not that the government takes care of the social needs. It is that the people take care of, every community take care of all the needs of the whole community. The idea of the community was strong. So there is an ideology and there is a matching institutional structure. This and the great transformation, both of these things change. The ideology changes and the institutional structure changes. So now, because it's very hard for us to imagine a non-market society, because we have been grown up and we have these are the things that we have imbibed. So even scholars of religion have imbibed the market mentality. It's very hard to think that there can be something else. So it's always, history is very difficult to study, because over time, periods, attitudes change, and we always, when we think back by placing ourselves in their position, but we do not understand that our whole ideological mental framework would be changed. And so it requires extra effort to understand the change in history. So let me explain about the pre-market societies, although it's known to us that they have a different mindset. There is a mutual dependence. Mutual dependence also exists. At this time, when I'm living the food that I eat is produced by 1,000 hands through 1,000 technologies and so on. And everything that I do, I am strongly dependent on the whole society. I could not live on my own in the same way. So we understand that we are all dependent on each other and we have to cooperate. The economist myth is that in the pre-market society there was barter and money came on to facilitate barter, the famous mutual coincidence of wants argument. This is wrong historically. Anthropologists have shown that barter did not exist in pre-market societies. They were, what happened was that people would give things to each other, and this would create debt. And basically that's a very interesting insight, that the society worked on debt. Everybody was always in debt to each other, and this was understood, that there was no way that I can pay off my debt to society, but I do what I can, and everybody understood that we are all deeply indebted. Now, what the thesis of Graeber is that money was invented in order to quantify debt. And you see, when you quantify debt, that okay, the service I performed for you is worth $100, and now if you pay me $100, then we are quits. Now, this is an entirely different conception of the society. It creates the society in a different way. And now, you see, once you pay me the money, then there is no debt which remains. So the lubricant of society, the fact that we are all indebted to each other, this disappears, and then the society becomes fragmented. And this is what has happened. Individualization can only happen when we refuse to recognize the relationships between each other, and these are quantified and monetized. And then, you see, I hire somebody and he does service to me. He does personal service to me. And you see, if you think about it this way, that suppose my mother cooks a great meal for me, I say, oh, mother, you have done a wonderful job. Let me pay you $100 for this. What a strange thing. Mother would be very insulted. That is exactly what happens in a society, a social transaction, when we refuse to recognize that we cannot buy human beings. Today we are buying human beings, and we are saying, okay, I've bought your time and now you will do whatever I want you to do. The thing is that human beings are valuable beyond purchase. So even if I pay somebody, I cannot purchase the person. So whenever he does something for me, I should count this, that okay, I have given him a token, but it is not a payment for his service. It can never be. So this kind of social thinking is different from, and so when you start going to a market economy, then this kind of thinking disappears. And you can buy people and you can sell people, and then the social structures become subordinated to the market. And today, you can buy parental services and you can buy childhood services. And some child in California sued his parents for not providing good parental services. So the case was rejected, but the concept, this is the market concept. Everything can be priced in the market. Now, in pre-market societies, self-sufficiency is a virtue. We don't want to be dependent on the others. Trade does occur, but it is in luxury goods, in peripherals, never in necessities. If something is necessary for your existence, you don't want to trade with somebody to get that. You want to produce it yourself. So markets are relatively unimportant, and also historical studies show that markets were very strictly regulated because people understood that markets can play a very bad, can have a very bad influence. So markets were restricted to opening once a week, and then there were some rituals for purification and many other rules and regulations so that markets do not corrupt societies. But then the great transformation took place, and that's the theme of the Polanyi book, that the one thing that happened was that machines were invented, industrial revolution type thing, actually pre-industrial revolution. But so this led to the possibility of excess production. Now, The strange thing is that in a pre-market society, if you do excess production, there's nothing you can do with it. All the societies are self-sufficient, so what will you do with the excess production? Also, people are taught the virtue of frugality, living a simple life, not expanding your desires beyond your means. So you have a lot of excess. What will you do? Nobody outside wants to buy this. Nobody inside wants to buy this. You'll just throw it away. So there's no point in excess production. So now what happens is that you need new ideologies to support trade. So the theory of this comparative advantage was invented in order to allow for trading. And it says that instead of everybody producing everything for themselves, which is the main idea of self-sufficiency, people should specialize. You produce one thing and I produce the other thing and we trade with each other. Now this is actually a stupid way of doing things. But our textbooks say that this is the Pareto optimal and everybody will have more of both things if you do that. That may be true under certain idealized circumstances, but there are some very severe disadvantages to this method. One of these is lack of self-sufficiency, the fact that your enemy can cut off your food during wartime, and many other harms from the loss of self-sufficiency. So, but anyway, what I'm saying is that the society, the market, when it generates excess, it also generates ideologies which allow this excess to be consumed. So one of the ideologies which is generated is the theory of comparative advantage. The other theory is that, okay, the goal of life is to consume. So you should have a luxury. Now this is, again, very much in contradiction with traditional society, which says that you should have a simple life and you should try to not have ostentation in consumption. As opposed to this, the market society says that you should consume conspicuously. The advertisements today read that make your neighbor jealous. Halanki, this is haram in Islamic teaching, that if you should not cause others to envy you, and actually we have examples that people used to eat simply because they said even though they could afford more, because they said I can do it but my neighbor cannot, so I should not do those things which cause him envy. And even in the hadith it says that if you eat fruit, either you send some to the neighbor or you bury the peel so that he cannot see, so that he doesn't feel. But the exactly opposite is now the mentality. Similarly, greed was transformed from vice to virtue. It used to be considered bad, but now it's considered a good thing. So remember the Scrooge, now we have a Disney cartoon, Uncle Scrooge, and he has huge amount of money and he's very clever, but this is no longer considered a bad thing. It's shown that, this cartoon suggests that this man is a very smart man and that's why he has gotten so much money, and there is no social opprobrium, no social wrong in his trying to maximize wealth. This is the normal thing to do for everybody. Anybody who is smart will be trying to do the same thing. So how did this happen? Well, there are many steps, but the first step that took place in England was that the landlords made enclosures. They enclosed large areas of land. This is the aristocrat, and they prevented they said this is my private property. This is a new conception of private property which emerged in the West. All throughout, property has been regarded as a trust. In Islam it is an amana. I have something but I can never be the owner of it. The owner is always Allah. I have something temporarily, it's given to me for safeguarding, and I have to preserve it and protect it and to pass it on to the next generation. This is the key. Now, in capitalism, also I cannot use this property in socially irresponsible ways. So, in England, when they were enclosures, there were these forests and rivers and marshes, and the socially responsible concept of property says that you cannot deprive people of access to this. If somebody goes and hunts in the forest, that's his right. Even if you cannot own natural resources; those belong to God. But this concept was broken up, and the private property was given an absolute right. A man's home is his castle, and now nobody can interfere. And if you want to burn up everything, you can do it, and if you want to be socially responsible, you can do it. So the idea that you are holding this property as a trust for others in the society and also for the next generation, this was lost. And this is the key to why we are facing such huge environmental problems today. Because the market created this ideology which suits the market, but it does not suit society. So when these enclosures were made, the landlords acquired the sole right to a huge amount of land which was beyond their capability of using. So the close, intimate relationship that people used to have with land was lost. In the traditional society, people live on land, which is their house and their garden, and they understand that the land sustains them. So the concept of Mother Earth is very well known. It's Mother Nature that feeds us and that provides for us and so on. But when the land was separated and it was taken as a property, it could then be exploited. So basically the market mentality turned labor and land into resources. So today we have the word human resources. It's a very insulting word to human beings to think of them as a unit of production for production of wealth. Human beings are the end, they are the goal. Everything else is subordinate to human beings. But here we are subordinating human beings to the production process. The production process is all important, and human beings are important only insofar as they can contribute to the production of wealth. So, as Max Weber recognized, the spirit of capitalism is the pursuit of wealth as a goal in itself, explicitly, without the aim of using the wealth for some purpose like acquiring happiness or acquiring goods or anything. It's just pursuit of wealth without, it's irrational pursuit of wealth, as he says. It's the King Midas parable that you convert everything you touch into gold. That's the purpose of life. Whether it's your daughter, it doesn't matter. So this process, the Great Transformation, created a change throughout the world. The people, human beings, were turned into laborers and consumers. These are all market agents. These are not human beings who live lives have families and society. These are people who are either producers of wealth or they are consumers of the objects produced by the production process. Now, when you have this huge amount of excessive production, this creates a change both internally. You turn your own population into consumers and laborers, and also externally. When England acquired a 50-year lead on other countries of the world, including Europe, in industrial production, then the colonization process started. What are we going to do with all this excess supply? Well, you go across the world and you take fully functioning, self-sufficient societies and you break them up, completely destroy the existing structures. When the British came to India was one of the most advanced industrialized societies of the world. If you look at Peter Kennedy, The Rise and Fall of Great Powers, you see that India was actually de-industrialized. It was not, as the current myth holds, that we were never industrialized. Actually, the industrialization was there. When the British conquered India, our textile industry was more advanced than the British industry, and shipbuilding and in education, our systems of education were far more advanced. And in fact, the idea of public education was taken from India to England, because previously English society thought that education is something which only for the elite class. The laborers should not be educated. They don't. But in India, there's a book. I forgot the author, but very famous. And he says that the English saw that and wrote that here ordinary clerk who earns 10 rupees gives his son an education which we give to our princes. And the madrasa of that time was teaching the same syllabus as Oxford. And they were widespread. You can find madrasas all over the India, in Sindh and small villages. And so education was prized and widespread. So all this system, the health system, the educational system, everything was broken up because they created self-sufficiency, and you cannot have self-sufficiency. You said, okay, your only job is to produce wheat. Everything else, even the textiles, you will just sell the cotton. The cotton industry was completely destroyed. People who were spinners of cotton, their thumbs were cut off so that they could not, when their machines were destroyed, we had the machine, then they started doing manual, and their thumbs were cut off to prevent them from this. So eventually all industry was destroyed. The cotton was shipped to England, and then it was manufactured and sold back to us. And so this is the working of the market, yani self-sufficiency. And this just happened in India, but all over the world the same thing happened, that self-sufficient societies which were functioning in their own ways, they were all destroyed, and they were turned into two things: producers of raw material for the industrialized societies and consumers of the products that were produced outside. So consumption chains were created. The Manchester laborers were spinning, were running machines which were producing clothes. At the same time, in Haiti, slaves were producing sugar. The Manchester laborers, who had never tasted sugar before, were addicted to sugar, so that they would produce clothes which would be sold in Haiti, and then they would buy it with sugar, and the sugar they would be consumed in Manchester. So this kind of useless consumption patterns were created, because this is the demand of the market to expand. So previously they were quite happy with their own clothing, and Manchester laborers didn't know anything about sugar and were perfectly happy not knowing, but then demands and tastes were created. Now, money is a very interesting thing. We learned that it is a store of value, but actually store of value is a very harmful thing, in the sense that in traditional society one had generosity. If you had a lot of goods, there was no way to store it. If you have excess, even you can think about Baqreed, you sacrifice an animal and you have lots of excess meat, it will spoil if you keep it, so you give it to others. So the traditional society encourages generosity. Just like the market society encourages hoarding. Now if you can convert this meat to money, suppose that there is no money, then you can't sell it. But if you can convert it to money, then you can save this. So now instead of giving it to others, you will save it. And similarly, and also if saving is encouraged, that this is a good thing, a wise thing, a prudent thing. So think about a society. See, this caused a tremendous amount of damage, which you call a negative externality. In a traditional society, we are always ready to help each other. So now if I am in trouble, I have 100 people who are ready to help me. In a market society, I cannot count on anybody for help. I can only count on money. So in order to take care of my contingencies, this famous precautionary motive for saving money, see, I have the possibility that I might fall seriously sick and then I might need 1 lakh rupees. So I need to have 1 lakh rupee in the bank just to take care of this contingency. And the same thing is true for everybody. So everybody must work hard from day to night to earn the money required to take care of him, because nobody else will. Now the thing is that in the whole society, only 1 or 2 people will fall sick. So if there is a cooperative attitude, then nobody needs to work. If I only work for 1,000 rupees and there are 100 people, between us we will generate 1 lakh rupee, and the one person who falls sick, all people will contribute. So and the sickness will be taken care of. So there is no excess production. What is needed is provided on a cooperative basis. Everybody needs to work much less. But if everybody is taking care only of himself, then because of the precautionary demand, there's a massive negative externality here. So the quantification of debt, money came into existence not as a store of value, but to quantify debt. Society worked on debt, and this was beneficial to society, that I give you something, there is no barter. This is if somebody needs something, I give it to him, and in return, the person who gets the money recognizes that he is socially in debt to me. And there's no point, there's no cashing of this debt. He recognizes or understands that he is in debt, and when I am in need, I can borrow, I can get his help. So the social debt creates love and harmony and cooperation. As opposed to this quantification of debt, I have given you this, now you owe me $100. You better pay this back, and if you don't, then I will enslave you in return. This is what happens, or I will put you into jail in return. So the quantification of debt creates social disharmony. It turns brothers into enemies. Today, this is happening in front of our eyes. The heavily indebted poor countries, thousands of people die because of interest payments. There are many case studies. There's one small country, I've forgotten the name. This is Graeber starts out with this example. I think it's Madagascar, I think. I'm not sure. They were behind on their debt payments, and the World Bank or IMF insisted that you have to pay. So what they did is they cut their social programs. One of the programs was to provide vaccination to all the children against a very common disease, malaria or something in that area. So they didn't provide the medicine, and thousands of children died next year because the payment was made. Now in traditional society, so today the law is that debts must be repaid. If you have borrowed money, you have to repay it, and you have to repay the interest, and this is your moral obligation. Now, Islam says that no, debt is not a moral obligation. One of the African countries says that we borrowed $40 billion, and now we have paid $85 billion by 2006, and still we owe another $80 billion. So what is the logic of this? So this is what's happening today, that everywhere when people are in need, then they borrow money at interest, and then they have to, and who are the people who borrow? The poor people. Obviously the rich people are not going to be borrowing money, and when they cannot repay, then they are forced to do very cruel things to their own population, cut social services, stop these programs so that people suffer, so that the rich people can be paid back their money. So today we are seeing a transfer of about, in the past 10 years, about $7 trillion from the poorest countries of the world to the richest countries of the world. This is all the effects of the market economy. And this is supposed to be the great system which we are studying and expounding and explaining, that this is the Pareto optimal system and we should all adopt it, and this is wonderful market system. So I'm saying that markets not only create a system, but they create an ideology which glorifies the system. These two things, processes, take place at the same time. So there is an illusion that is created that, oh, the world has become much richer because the processes of capitalism over the past 100 years have created wealth. This is just wrong calculation. If you do the calculation correctly, if you look at the amount of damage and destruction, if you look at the number of fishes which have been destroyed, and the species of animals, and the damage to the atmosphere and pollution, then there are things like, if you destroy a species, this took billions of years to generate. You can never replace it. If you use oil, is sitting in the ground, you count it as in GNP it counts as a plus, but you don't count the cost. What is the replacement cost? How much would it cost for me to produce this oil? It would cost a billion-year geological process. So if you understand this is a precious gift of God, it cannot be priced in the marketplace. Use it, but use it with care, with trust. Instead of saying, okay, this water costs 3 rupees per gallon, so I can throw it away. No, the cost of the water is not the market price. This is one of the key illusions. This is one of the strong contentions of new classical economy is that the things are to be valued at their market price. The market prices are the correct signal, but this is completely wrong. The market prices are the wrong signal because they do not take into account the replacement value. And because the market prices give the wrong signals, there's a huge amount of distortion which is going on. We are destroying planetary resources. You take a forest which is a miracle of nature which could never be recreated, and you cut it down for timber, and you create furniture, and you say, okay, I've made a profit. So this is if you count that as a profit, then the capitalist economy has created wealth. But if you count the cost, then you can say that the capitalism has destroyed the planet and humans and societies, because by converting human beings into human resources, you take the man out of the family, you take the woman out of the family, and they are all working from day and night to produce wealth for somebody else. Meanwhile, the family itself has been destroyed. So today we have a wealth creation machine which is running out of control. It runs on certain mechanical processes. In 2010, about 380 people owned about 50% of the planetary wealth. In 2015, it's only 62. That is how fast the wealth creation process is creating suction at the top. We talk about the trickle-down effect, but actually what we have is a vacuum cleaner effect. All the wealth is being taken, sucked up from the bottom and being put to the top. So how can we reverse this process? It's necessary if we want to save the planet. So some people say that, okay, you can see the Millennium Development Goals and many other things, many other actions are taking place which are to protect the planet, to resilience, etc., etc., etc. Lots of things are being done. But this is actually part of the double movement. Market is trying to destroy society, society is trying to protect itself. This is not going to save the planet. What we are trying to do is, it's called palliation. I mean, somebody is trying to kill you at the same time. You see, you bomb Afghanistan, and then you also send in the Red Cross so that the patients who are dying, they have somebody who can put the band-aid on the wounds. And the people who have lost their farms and ways of living, you give them a little bit of food to provide some palliation to this injury. This is not going to do the trick. Actually, you see, what currently people are searching for are solutions to the problems within the system. You cannot, the system has to remain the same, but we want to change the damage that is happening. This cannot be done because basically people have realized that growth itself is not compatible with the survival of the planet. Today, what we need is zero growth. We need to stop growth. But zero growth is not compatible with capitalism, because if capitalism requires growth, otherwise there will be massive unemployment, unrest. So the current institutional structure is not compatible with survival of the planet. So what we need to do is to change the ideologies. And this is not an easy job at all. We need to replace the ideology of individualism, selfishness, pursuit of luxury, freedom, everybody, independence. You don't need to have any regard for society. You only need to pursue your own goals. All of these are ideologies which are coming with the marketplace and with the capitalism, and these have to be replaced with the traditional ideologies, which are cooperation, responsibility, caring, compassion, simple lifestyles. We have to understand that this planet is not a commodity for sale. Just like human beings, societies, families, these are not commodities for sale. They are the object. And so the planet also, it's a living planet. People have come up with the metaphor of Gaia, the living planet. This is the modern version of Mother Nature. When I breathe, then carbon dioxide comes out of my mouth. When the plants breathe, they absorb the carbon dioxide and they produce oxygen. So we are living in a balance. I cannot treat this tree as my partner in life in some sense. So I have to respect nature. It has been given to us as a trust. We have to protect it for the future generations. None of this is being done because of the individual, narrow, profit-minded pursuit, which is part of the market mentality. So how we can change the mentality? Well, you see, one of the insights of Polanyi was that this great transformation didn't come about gradually by an evolutionary process that slowly things changed. It was a revolution. There was a big battle, not one but many battles which were fought, and bloody battles, in which some parties lost everything and some parties gained everything. And so, because these ideologies of the market and society are really antithetical to each other, they cannot coexist peacefully. So in order to create change, you cannot do it in a gradual step-by-step way. You have to create a revolution. And the revolution has to be simultaneous. It has to be in institutional structures and in ways of thinking. And we are seeing some steps, many steps, like for example the Indus Hospital in Karachi and many other such organizations. These are unique. These do not exist in market societies, where we have a private institution in which people are, everybody who comes in, there is no cash counter. They are treated and provided with modern healthcare, and the institution is funded by people. And actually the way people have calculated that the zakat obligations and the jazba, the feeling of people to help others is sufficient to provide for all of us our needs in Pakistan. But the institutional mechanisms are not there. That is, if the people could find an effective way to help the hungry, everybody is willing to contribute, and there is enough money available to end hunger in Pakistan. But the institutional structures of the market society prevent this from happening. And the institutional structures of pre-market societies have been destroyed. They did used to exist. So now we have to create, like the Indus Hospital, other structures like charitable waqf, and which were in presence in traditional societies. So we have to create the structures, and we have to create the ideology that we have to say, and we have to accept this as a social norm, that every child in Pakistan is my child. Responsibility for educating him and feeding him and providing him with health services is my responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the child's parents that if they have the money then they can educate him. If they don't have money, then too bad. He doesn't have any right to an education. The child doesn't have any right to food if his parents cannot buy the food for him. This is the current market mentality. This has to be changed, and we have to create consensus on a new way. Actually, it's an old way of thinking which has become obsolete and old-fashioned, and now it has to be revived if we want to save the planet and if we want to save the society. So that's where I will end.